Hello and welcome back to part 2 in a video series right now where I'm looking at DIY and turnkey NAS solutions. In the previous part, I talked about why users who are either deep in turnkey NAS solutions like these or are considering this platform are put off by or intimidated by DIY NAS solutions. Now, let's flip the tables, because in today's video, I'm going to talk about why users that are either already in DIY or are considering DIY will never ever go turnkey. What are their big hot button, I'm not going there reasons? I'm going to give you 10 reasons why. But before we go any further, quick disclaimer. One, I would recommend watching the previous video because there will be callbacks to that in this. But secondly, I'm not even going to mention, it's like 0.0 on my list, DIY NAS solutions. Often things like TrueNAS are completely free. However, you do pay for it in your time. That phrase, what is it? Money poor, time rich. So it is a viable option, I will say. And pricing of DIY in terms of the software level is part of a factor, but I didn't want to include it in my top 10, but I include it here just to make sure you know it's there. But let's crack on with number 1. Few things in 2025 have made DIY home labbers laugh their tits off more than the subject of turnkey NAS solutions and vendor lock-in. It has been a consistent reason for a lot of users who have been deep in owning their own data for a long time to not consider turnkey NAS solutions. But where do we want to start? Hard drive lock-ins that Synology eventually had to U-turn on, PCIe card compatibility and support, driver injection, custom repositories, CPU choices, network interface choices, number of drives, expansion support. These are all things that to a greater or lesser degree, all turnkey NAS solutions factor in as lock-in, lock-out, and effectively artificial caps. These are things that for the most part, and in some cases completely and utterly, are not a thing on DIY. TrueNAS and UnRAID, or of course there are other DIY NAS software options in the market. So again, one of the things that I think a lot of users that go DIY that they're never going to look back is simply that turnkey NAS solutions have got a real tendency to lock in. This next point is such an anathema to DIY NAS users that a lot of them don't even know about it. When they hear about it, they're incredulous in 2025 that a lot of turnkey NAS solutions, the operating system and the storage is on the same drives. There are a number of NAS solutions in the market where when you set up the NAS operating system, it lives on the same media that your RAID pool and volumes, depending on the file system. That's bonkers, right? The idea that if your drives fail, your operating system fails too. Having both of those eggs in one basket, I know sends chills down the spine of some DIY NAS users. And circling back to that point of the storage vendor pretty much setting the rules of the game, it has to be said that DIY NAS, you guys that have been using it for a while, again, TrueNAS is a great example, but UnRAID again as well, the level of customization, tweaking and fine-tuning you can do to practically every layer is unparalleled. A lot of it you're going to have to go command line, of course, but still, cache behavior, storage blocks, network stack, forcing through things even when the operating system says, are you sure about this? You're going to have to force it if you want it. Everything from power consumption control and more. The level of fine-tuning and control is to the same degree utterly absent on some turnkey NAS brands, and although there are some vestiges of that control built in, for the most part through a turnkey claiming it for stability reasons or turnkey NAS systems trying to keep it simple stupid, there is no parallel between the level of customization, tweaking and control on DIY to be found on turnkey. And likewise to my previous point, the level of hardware ownership on DIY is just a different universe compared to turnkey NAS solutions. Whether it is that you want to recycle old hardware or buy your own hardware of choice, or simply want to go on eBay to buy some decommissioned old enterprise rack and turn it into your private plaything for your home lab, you can do that with pretty much every DIY NAS software out there. Whereas on Turnkey, you are locked in on this hardware and you are locked in buying it from their vended retailers. You can buy it secondhand, but you lose out on a lot of the support options and therefore the value proposition of Turnkey sometimes. Ultimately, you just can't rival the level of hardware ownership, control, and environmental reusage overall on DIY in the turnkey NAS landscape. It's just not possible. DIY NAS server deployments are generally very unique from one user to the next, and that ensures a much more randomized attack surface. Now, turnkey NAS solutions, because again they set the rules of the game dependent on the different operating system on these turnkey NAS solutions, the number of variables and random adjustments you can make to your security settings are clearly reduced. Now, we are still talking about many variable factors here, but still they pale in comparison to a DIY NAS setup. And depending on the NAS operating system that you choose to run on your setup there, the result is going to be that your attack surface can be drastically controlled in a way that it can't be on turnkey NAS. Come on, you were waiting for this one. Logical and easy scalability. When it comes to most DIY NAS softwares, notwithstanding the operating system lives on its own drives in most cases, we talked about earlier on. But on top of that, if you have, say this 45 drives home lab thing, right? This HL8, say you put 8 drives inside this and then down the line you want to upgrade to some second-hand or even first-hand 40 or 60 bay rack, you can just take those drives and lump them into that. You can scale up easily with any hardware you choose to use. And the same goes, by the way, when you want to add expansions by adding another chassis, maybe taking advantage of a SAS card or something like that to expand your storage or mirror it. In turnkey NAS circles, you are still locked in through their ecosystem and their hardware. Notwithstanding that you can't take the drives out of a Synology and put them in anything else easily, or in some cases at all, other than a Synology system. But on top of that, take this little 4 bay here, you can expand this system with just 5 more drives. But those 5 drives have to be in a Synology JBOD enclosure. So their Synology JBOD 5 bay enclosure, the DX525, is about 400 to 450 nicker. It is a brainless JBOD connected via USB. You can't use a bigger one, even though they have a 12 bay expansion, by the way. You have no flexibility or freedom, whereas in DIY circles, the scalability is easy and limitless. And we half touched on it already. Your pools in most DIY NAS software is not locked in to that operating system or that NAS OS or UI. So if you've created a ZFS pool in TrueNAS, you can migrate it into UnRAID. You can take pools from many of the DIY NAS platforms out there and move them point to point easily. It's not just about expandability. You can migrate between NAS operating systems when you spot something over the fence you might like, whereas you just can't do it. You can't take a Synology RAID pool, because the operating system is within it, and then move it into a QNAP or a QNAP into an ASUS store. You just can't. So again, you're not locked in, but more precisely, you can move your pool. Your pool is independent of the operating system. Now I've subbed in Ugreen for this next point because for many users it was a very loud point that they seem to make about certain DIY NAS solutions, and that is true definitive telemetry control. When you set up a NAS solution, what you don't want is your system idly pinging certain DNSs or certain IPs in certain regions of the world that you don't want it to. And in the case of UnRAID, in the case of TrueNAS, you have a huge degree of control over those points to ensure that there's no calls to home, no little errant back doors that you don't like thinking about. Now, be honest, if you are building from scratch, you have to trust that the hardware manufacturer has not put a dummy little controller in there, but still the gateway is the NAS operating system. And in the case of some DIY NAS software, you are unable to change or bar certain paths, and you either have to rely on your router catching them or set up additional layers, which again are only as foolproof as the whitelist and the blacklist entries that get captured. Bottom line, DIY NAS users often will not migrate over to certain turnkey NAS solutions because of that level of control and 99.9% certainty. Remember earlier when I mentioned that certain turnkey NAS solutions take the operating system and your storage and sort of roll it into one big hot mess underneath the hood? Well, when the majority of turnkey, the DIY NAS solutions arrive with their operating system separate, it means your system can be what you want it to be. So in the case, for example, of TrueNAS, you can create pure storage. You can make sure that the operating system is just keeping those balls in the air. It's not running apps, not running additional services that you might not want. TrueNAS gets to be a pure platform just to run your storage. It's more clean, it's more efficient, and you are more in control and you get more out of your hardware. Then you look at something like Proxmox. Proxmox becomes pure virtualization for your storage. Again, it's not quite NAS, but I include it because it allows your hardware to just remove fluffy layers of waste in terms of what your DIY NAS software has access to for the hardware. And look at UnRAID. UnRAID boots from your USB and runs in the RAM, again allowing your system to be so tightly efficient and under your control, you can get the most out of that hardware. Most turnkey NAS solutions aren't able to run in that pure storage or pure target optimized state because of, and I'm not going to use the word bloatware, but I'm going to say that those operating systems have numerous apps and bells and whistles built in during boot up that you can't turn off. And this next point may seem unfair to those that are deep in turnkey NAS solution ecosystems to single out hardware over software, but it in the end pays dividends. The level of modular control and swap out on DIY, there's nothing like that in turnkey. If you've grown up in the UK, you may have heard the expression triggers broom. Triggers broom is when a road sweeper won an award for using the same broom for several decades to sweep the streets. But he proudly proclaimed that he'd replaced the handle, he'd replaced the screws, and he'd replaced the broom head over the years. Is that the same broom? You tell me. But the fact still remains that when it comes to DIY NAS solutions, you can replace the CPU, you can replace the RAM, you can replace the MOBO, you can replace the network interfaces, you can replace the case, you can replace everything, and it can still be the same server granularly. You can still have your same security authorization, and you've still got support of all of that hardware. You can integrate it, tweak it as mentioned, and ultimately the level of modular control that the software allows you to do is just not available with such freedom and alacrity in the world of turnkey. But there you go. Those are 10 reasons why those that are utilizing DIY NAS software don't consider switching to Turnkey. They might recommend it for some businesses, recommend it for home users, or recommend it for family members that they don't want to spend their whole time giving free IT support to. But in their own home lab, they will always go DIY. Let me know what you guys think. Are you a Turnkey NAS solution user who doesn't agree with the things I've said, or maybe I over-egged it for you? Maybe you're a DIY NAS user and you've got something you disagree with something I've said. I really look forward to talking about it below. But thank you so much for watching. Now, link below are other videos and guides that we've done on TrueNAS, UnRAID, Zimmer OS, and more. Alongside that, there's recommended guides and components that I've used before with great success within different DIY NAS builds. So if you found this video helpful, if you're going to go to the shops link below anyway, and if you want to support what me and Eddie do here at NAS Compares, please use those links in order to get hold of the right hardware for your needs. And it also allows us to get a small commission on anything you purchase, so it costs you nothing extra than what you were going to buy anyway, and it allows us to keep doing what we do. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.